Welcome back to the Game & Muscle YouTube channel. Now, earlier this week I was reading a really complicated book, and on page 4 it said, not everybody has hundreds of pounds worth of simulation equipment. Now, that's ridiculous, but I can't disagree with this book. So, as a result of that discovery, I thought I'd check out Project Cars 2 with a gamepad, namely the Xbox One controller, which is basically an Xbox 360 controller. Maybe some of you guys remember the original Xbox One controller, the Xbox controller, the Duke, which they then had to replace because it was too big for people to hold on to. I liked it. Really good playing the original Halo with that. Nonetheless, Project Cars 2 with a controller. Now, one of the big complaints with Project Cars 1 was that it was really hard to play with a controller. So obviously lots of people are interested to know if Project Cars 2 is actually easier to play with a controller than Project Cars 1. And you'll be glad to know that it indeed is, or at least is with the out-of-the-box controller settings. I think with Project Cars 1, when I messed around with it with a controller, you could get it quite reasonable, but it just took a lot of fiddling with how the controller was interpolated to make it so it was playable. I think one thing that has happened in Project Cars 2, outside of the default controller profile being a lot more forgiving, is that because the tyres in general seem to have a little bit more ply to them, in some ways the tyres are actually more forgiving. So it's harder to get into that situation where you just get the back end coming out and you can't then stop it. Now, of course, you know, a controller, it's just a simple fact of the matter. A game's controller is not... Cars weren't built for Xbox controllers. Even if you go back to arguably the first motor vehicle in 1885, the Benz car, I don't think even that had a proper name. It was just... It was a painted carriage with a motor on it, essentially. But even if you go back to that, you essentially had a metal arm that stuck out with a brass knob on it that you had to grip a hold of firmly. Grip that turgid knob firmly in your palm, and then you could manipulate the vehicle in the direction you wanted it to go. Obviously, that just connected straight to the front wheel. Just had one wheel on the front. Who needs two when one works fine? But even in that case, the point is that gives you a very wide analog radius, very precise degrees of input, which of course you need when you're going at 5 miles per hour in a motorised carriage. You wouldn't want Jeeves to lose control and accidentally run over the local lord. But obviously when it comes to playing with a gamepad, you just don't have that analog input. In short, if you want to get the most out of anything that has realistic handling, you're going to need to get a steering wheel. And I have to say, especially for me, someone that does play driving sims with a steering wheel, playing Project Cars 2 or any realistic or somewhat realistic driving game with a gamepad is just excruciatingly difficult and very, very frustrating. But to make this video of use to those of you that do exclusively play with a gamepad, I have been playing Forza Motorsport 6, and I think that's of course going to be the direct comparison of input for driving games. The people that buy Project Cars 2 are likely to be also people that like the Forza games. And I do think there are some benefits and negatives with each one. I think the biggest benefit that Forza 6 has over Project Cars 2 at this point in time, and I don't know if this is because of the press version I've got doesn't support this properly yet, so maybe this is in the final version of the game, but with Forza, what they've got that's really nice is the haptic rumble on the Xbox One controller, at least, where when you're pulling the brake, when you start locking up the rears and start slipping, you get a very precise and quite violent rumble through the brake analog, the brake trigger, the analog stick trigger, that lets you then modulate the brake and effectively pull it as hard as you can before you get that rumble to then avoid yourself locking up. Now in Project Cars 2, as I say with the version I've got, what you tend to have to do, because you don't have that rumble there, is you listen out more to the brake sound, and they've done a really good job actually on the tyre skid sound, so you can tell from the skid noise how much grip you've got if you're braking too hard, and if you're going to be inducing oversteer or locking up understeering from locking up the brakes too much. And you also have to sort of to judge it off the camera movement and then just more of a practiced expectation, which you do to an extent do in Forza as well. But I just think that the lack of having that immediacy of the rumble, for me, makes the braking a lot harder in Project Cars 2 than it does Forza. What is really nice, though, in Project Cars 2 compared to Forza, and this is one of the things that really put me off Forza 6, for example, which I hope is fixed in later versions of Forza, is in Forza there's the when you're powering out of corners, especially low-speed corners in mid to high-speed cars, and even in some of the slower cars, the rears of the cars can just light up, or you can get into a slide and there's just no recovering it at all. It just seems to happen as almost a totally baked thing that happens in Forza. And it's really, really frustrating, especially as you'll be doing, you're doing some of the later events or harder events, and you've got your way all to the front, you've not done anything wrong, and then the back pops out and you can't do anything. You try and catch it, it just makes it even worse. Really nicely, in Project Cars 2, that doesn't seem to happen. Now, you can obviously lose the back of the car by braking too heavy or by getting on the power too much. You can still get into a dead slide, but I think it's a lot more forgiving. And it's a lot less likely that, say you've done multiple laps, you've got really used to a car and you're fairly confident in a race, it's a lot less likely that you'll get into a slide that was seemingly out of the blue. So in that regard, with a gamepad, Project Cars 2 is less frustrating. It really is swings and roundabouts, though, and personally, I do think, on balance, ignoring that really annoying dead slide, on balance, I think Forza 6 is probably better to be played with a gamepad than Project Cars. But then having said that, on the other side of it, when I've played Forza 6 with a steering wheel, it is nowhere near as enjoyable or as fun as Project Cars 2 with a steering wheel. So I think Forza does the sort of more, pure arcade approach like that, sat on the sofa driving game better than Project Cars 2, and Project Cars 2 sort of accommodates a bit of that, but then it's getting more onto the sort of simulation side of things as we lose the back of the car because I'm driving like a buffoon. In short, I think the end thing is that Project Cars 2 is playable with a gamepad. It's better than Project Cars 1 was with a gamepad, but it's obviously better played with a steering wheel by far. So, Billy Mays here. Underneath the video, I've put Amazon affiliate links to the Thrustmaster T300 and the Logitech G29 wheel, which I think they're the cheapest good quality wheels that will work with driving simulators, and they also work on the consoles and on PC. The T300 is my personal best value for money wheel. But I can appreciate it might be too expensive. So when it comes to like pure budget, Driving Force GTs unfortunately are no longer on the market. So I do sort of get air towards the Logitech G29 wheels. I know some people complain about them and they're not perfect, but if you can get them for the prices they sometimes go at, you get the clutch, you get the brake, you get the shifter and everything. I think it's a reasonably good package. It's a good starter package. Those of you that do intend to play with a gamepad, however, I guess you could go to your local building site and pick up a brick and just hit yourself in the head with it a few times, and you won't notice if you're doing good or bad anyway, and it'll still be really good fun. I definitely found with Project Cars 2 that if you're driving slower vehicles, it's perfectly fine to be played with a gamepad and you can get away with it. And you can even put the AI on quite hard settings and still generally keep up to them, or I could, and I'm not that amazing with a gamepad. I'm totally someone that drives the steering wheel. But where I really started to struggle is if I get into the Formula 1 cars, Formula A as they call it in the game, or any of those sort of the very top tier vehicles. I'd say anything sort of within two or so tiers of the top spec vehicles, you can play with a gamepad perfectly fine, even with the AI, or for me, on about 95% difficulty. I could do that perfectly fine, generally keep up with them, and have an actual good time racing. But with the Formula cars and the very top tier cars, I'd have to put the AI on like 20 or 30% to keep up with them, and I would just going off the track all the time. Because these cars are ridiculously tight, the brakes on them are ridiculously responsive, and the shifting is so fast. There will be people out there that could do it, I'm sure, but it's really, really hard with a gamepad. So all in all, I hope that gives you a good idea of what Project Cars 2 is like to play with a gamepad. Probably more useful for those of you that like to game on a potato, and I think it's nice that you can play something that's much more on the simulation side compared to pretty much anything else out there on the console side. I mean, you've literally got Assetto Corsa and Project Cars at the moment, and then Project Cars 2. It'll be interesting how realistic GT Sport is and what that's like as well. But yeah, that's it. That's your choice. Project Cars 1 and 2 and Assetto Corsa. just get a PC, guys. That's why spend all your money. But there you go. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. Don't forget to like. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see more of and what you think. I promise those of you that aren't into Project Cars 2 that will be doing other videos very soon. It's been a week of Project Cars 2. And lastly, as I say, bear in mind this is a press media version of the game, not the final version of the game, so stuff might change from what I've said here. Off for a cup of tea. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.